Don't forget to join our Patreon community for monthly hangouts, extra content and conversations going on at our discourse page. We'd love to have your asses there.
And I remember blacking out, and I remember going down. I remember falling backwards onto a hickory hard floor and smashing the back of my head on the hardwood floor. And then I remember vaguely hearing the door open and Erica coming in and yelling, "Oh no," and running to me. And she came to me trying to help me. And I was so angry. I was so pissed. And she was like, "Why are you angry?" And I was like, "God." And she was just holding me and she's crying. And I looked up to the heavens, as much as I could through a ceiling in a house. And I just said out loud, I said, "You have me. I have done everything for you. I followed the rules forever." I got in bed, and then fear just washed over me. I was like, I just told God to fuck off after what just happened. Everybody stay away because a lightning strike's coming. And I called my mom and I was crying and I was like, "I've done it now." And she's like, "What have you done?" And I said, "I told God to fuck off." And she said, "It's okay. She's just a pissed off kid. You think you're the first person to tell God to fuck off?"
I demanded, pleaded, called God on promises and was like, "You have to show up or I am done." And he did.
That's something to really think about. What does it mean that the God of the universe loves me?
Are we saying that our God is bigger than their God or what?
Man, you got my mind going crazy right now.
I just think that is evangelical bullshit.
And I don't fit in their box anymore. So feeling rejected from the church makes me feel far away from God.
If I'm living out the love of God, love of the divine, then in some ways we're unoffendable.
It's wrong to marginalize anybody for any reason.
Sometimes we can just have some things about our perspective that's off until we encounter someone who can challenge our thoughts, have conversations with us, and we just continue to grow and evolve.
I'm with you there. Yeah, I like that.
That sounded like womp, 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 womp to Rob.
I'm a hardcore gospel lover. I do love the gospel. I just think we get it wrong.
Girl, I was so highly medicated, I don't even know if you Oh, God, my people.
All right, with everything crazy going on in our world, here's an episode. It's good. There's good stuff today. Sink deep into the human experience, the mystery of God. How about that? And the beauty of the human spirit. So, me and Robbie hear for the first time Hayne's story of breaking his neck, world falling apart. He literally curses God. And then in fear, he reaches out to his mom, who, with motherly, caring love, points her son to a loving God who happens to be way too big to be mad about what his child says at his lowest point in life. And you won't believe what God speaks to Hayne's heart. It's a doozy of a story. In the darkness and gravity of this situation for Hayne, you also get to hear about his family. We call them firefighters. He calls them family. So may this be a reminder to us all as we listen. What's most important in your life? Are you invested in the good stuff like family and friends? Real spending time with them? Because if you have that, life is always worth the living. And no matter what is going on in this world, you can make it with others and maybe even have some joy along the way. All right, I did want to say there's quite a bit of heavy language in this one, it's also interconnected to the emotions and heaviness of the dialogue. I bleep no more, so sorry to those with more sensitive ears. And you know us God thinkers, typical of this show, we ended with some good old-fashioned, did God allow, cause, did he want to stop, couldn't stop? Well, when you figure that one out, I'm going to tell you how God has always existed and explain exactly how all that works. I hope you enjoy. Hey, my first memory of you was on an Emory tour bus, and they were recording a documentary on Emory. I think it was for the Question release or something like that. But go to the back of the bus. I remember I had braces.
I forgot about that.
Yeah,
you
I had
did
braces, and I gave my story of how Emory started and kind of our background, with me, Toby and Matt and Devin and all those guys. That was, it may have been the first time you and I met. It's definitely the first memory. Had you already gone through what we're about to talk about? Like, had that already happened, or?
No, that was way before. That would have been probably roughly 2006, maybe, is when we met. We were in Charlotte, on the back of a tour bus. You and Priscilla came out. That's when I met both of you guys. And it was real quick in passing. I was just actually thinking about it, knowing that we're going to talk about this today. So today, October the 12th, 2023, it was 10 years to the day today that I had a super violent mountain biking wreck and accident. So that would have been, do the math, 7 years after we met.
Okay. That
happened. And I would have said, pre Erica's cancer, 2013 was the worst year of my life, without a doubt. It was also, in retrospect, the best year of my life. I would say now the worst year or years of my life was Erica's cancer journey and battle. And I'm still waiting to see how is this going to be. It has been growth already, but it hasn't paid off. Paid off is a bad word to use. I'm still waiting to learn from this, her experience. But in 2013, two things happened to me. First, the entire beginning of 2013 up to about June that summer, I just started getting sick, and I didn't know why I was getting sick. And I was super thirsty. I couldn't sleep. And it wasn't an illness like the flu. I could still go to work, but I was so lethargic. I just was really messed up. You guys know me, but the listeners don't know me. I'm 6'4", like 185. So I'm a tall, lean dude. And that's going to make sense in a second. I didn't know what was going on. Make a long story short, I went in for a health screening, and it turns out that I was diabetic. Not type 2, I was type 1, which kind of blew my mind. I'm like, I'm not lethargic. I'm a firefighter. I work out every day. And I was riding bikes. I was probably logging 100 miles a week on a mountain bike. So I was super fit, and then all of a sudden I get this diagnosis, you're type 1. So what does that mean? So we worked through that.
In type 1, there's no environmental. It's not about fitness or non-fitness. It's just a condition.
It's
right?
a condition. So normally it's a childhood condition, adolescent condition. I was an adult onset type 1. And since that's happened to me, people will say, oh, you need to meet Hayne. And they'll come up to me and they'll be like, hey, I hear that you're adult onset type 1. I'm like, yeah. And they're like, I am too. It's been kind of amazing how many folks that's their story that I've met. But they believe that, no, that's not a lifestyle type thing. It's a genetic, which I have zero genetic history of it, or there was a virus or an external factor, some kind of shock to your body. I've been in a fire training about 9 months before I was diagnosed. And in the training, it was all done. It was a survival training. I was trapped in a burning room for 45 minutes. We were having to do bottle exchanges because we were running out of air. And it was all training. Everything was controlled. But I was 45 minutes in a room that probably sat at 400 degrees. And then when I came out of that room, I remember almost fainting because my body temperature dropped so quickly. My blood pressure dropped so quickly. And that's the only thing other than a potential virus that kicked me into type 1 that they could say was such a dramatic shock to my body that it may have started. And because of the timing of that training, it kind of correlated with the possibility that was it. So we'll never know, but that's what happened to me. So I get that shocking news in June. And in some ways, it was a relief to get the news because, that's why I feel so shitty all the time. Like, we understand. And we were able to correct that. And I kind of, in a very unique, alternative, aggressive way, have managed that for 10 years, doing great. But June, I got that diagnosis. We kind of get things under control in July. And then I'm getting back on the bike. I'm riding hard. And man, I mountain biked with some horses, like guys that they were way above my skill level. But my ego was such that, let's send it, man. Let's go hard. I was having a great time.
For a second, I was like, you mountain bike with horses? I thought they were bikes.
I thought the same thing.
I'm using all this Ashevillean adventure language, Stallions. I was mountain bike with stallions. But these guys were just, their fitness. So I could hang with them fitness-wise Where I couldn't hang with them is just on downhill, just blasting downhill. And downhill, where we live, we live in the tallest mountains in the Appalachian Range from Georgia to Maine are right here. So the mountain biking, certain trails, the gradient, you're dropping hundreds of feet within a quarter of a mile. It's really aggressive. It's big. I remember multiple times just hanging on for dear life. I would often listen to the Beastie Boys while I was doing my downhill because there's something about the flow of their beats that actually calm me down when I'm riding with these guys that I can barely keep up with. So it was a Sunday afternoon. I had just gotten off of light duty for my diabetes. So I'd worked one shift. They put me on light duty, which basically means I'm off the rig, but I do clerical work. I work a 9 to 5 for the department. That had ended. I worked one full shift on like a Saturday. That next Sunday, my buddies are like, let's go for a mountain bike ride. We take off on this classic downhill it's local. It's 5 minutes down the road. It's big. And about 2/3 of the way down, I just take a spill. And it's fall here. The leaves are covering roots. I take a spill. I came off the bike, off the front of it. I hit my head first on the ground. We're flipping over. I remember when I flipped over, my butt and my legs hitting the ground and then just sliding. I remember the bicycle flying over me, the top.
And when you say your head hit the ground first, are we talking forehead, top of the head?
Top of the head. Yeah, right on the top of the head. And then when I started to slide and I watched the bike fly over me, I realized I can't hear anything. It was just like a ding, almost like a gun had gone off. I can't hear anything. And then I was like, well, let's get up. And I couldn't get up. I was paralyzed. Like full on, couldn't move my legs. And the first thought in my mind was not, oh my gosh, I'm paralyzed. It was, oh no, I got to go on light duty again. That's the first thing I thought. I worked one shift back on the rig and right back to light duty. And that was a very fleeting thought. And then I was like, holy shit, I think I just became a paraplegic. I mean, that's what I thought. Oh my gosh. And I'm laying there in the dirt, and the two guys that were riding with me who were still super close friends, I've already texted them today, happy anniversary. Like every August 12th, we talk about this, the two guys I'm with.
October 12th.
Oh, thank you. October. I get them all months mixed up. October 12th. I'm laying there in the dirt. They come to check on me. Are you okay? And I was like, I can't move my legs. And then all of a sudden, I started getting feeling back. I was like, I can move my toes. I can move my legs. I look down. I can move them. And I said out loud, or my buddy Seth saw that. And he was like, oh, sweet dude, let's ride out of here. You're good to go. And I was like, no, I'm not good to go, because I looked at my hands and my hands were posturing in, like the nervous system from my spine. Yeah. Our hands are normally like this, and my hands were like turning in, and I couldn't straighten them. And that's when I was like, there's something seriously wrong with my nervous system. So my buddy Adam was like, what do we need to do? And I said, we got to call 911. And because I worked, basically was a 911 responder, he dialed 911 and held the phone to my ear. And I spoke to dispatch and said, this is where I am. This is the trail I'm on. I took a spill. I said, I think it's a definitive spinal injury. We need help. And they said, help's on the way. We hung up. Then I called my wife, and she picked up, and I was actually supposed to be home like pretty quickly. So there was some level of agitation in her voice, but when I told her what happened, it just 0 to 100, like total about face, like, oh my gosh, I'm coming. So my buddy Adam, Seth's like, I'm going to stay with you. Adam's like, I'm going to ride to the bottom of the trailhead where the ambulance is coming, and I'll meet them and bring them up. Great. Adam takes off. Seth stays with me.
And how are you wired up as a person? Like in your head, are you in freak out mode, or are you in, okay, like, cause Priscilla, she can be kind of an uptight person, but when the shit really hits the fan, she goes into calm, steady mode. Me. Like is that you?
That's completely me. That's why I think I'm good at my job. That's why it works well for me professionally, is that when things get big and get real, it's almost like a race. Like if I was going to run a race, I may be a little jittery before the race. As soon as the gun goes off, my jitters are gone. I am in it. I'm fully committed. So no, I wasn't in full panic at all. I was angry at myself. Like, what were you doing riding, and the leaves, and you should have, it's me doing the what ifs. I should have missed that. I should have missed that. Anyway, why did I even say yes to riding today? Just stupid narratives in my mind.
Yeah.
So in about 20, 30 minutes, Adam comes running up the trail with the med bags. I mean, he has everything, his backpack, he's carrying them all. And this was about 1.5 miles straight up a mountain. He gets to me. And he's out of breath, but he's just trucking. The guy's just an absolute badass of a specimen. And I'm like, where are the paramedics? And he was like, I don't know. I just grabbed their bags and took off. They were behind him. They were pretty overweight and out of shape. So he pulls the med back out and he's like, he said, what do you need? And I said, put the blood pressure cuff on me. They did. I said, put the stethoscope in my ears. They did. Hold the stethoscope on my arm, pump it up at him. And then when I say, okay, look at the number on the BP cuff. And then when I say, okay, again, remember that number. So that was my blood pressure. So I was taking my blood pressure. I was listening to it. And
you're treating yourself.
Yeah. And they were doing everything. And then I had a pulse oximeter, which lets people know what my O2 sat is, which is 100 is 100%. So my O2 sat was great, around 99. My pulse was good. My blood pressure was a little bit high, and then it started to level out. And we took vitals every 5 minutes, and they recorded them. And when the paramedics got to us, finally, we just handed them all my vitals. And they were kind of shocked, like, wow, you guys took vitals for the last 20 minutes. And I explained what I did for a living. They're like, oh, great. And they said, are you in pain? And I said, yeah, it's starting to set in. So then they started an IV on me and started dropping morphine in my system to kind of take the pain away. By that point, the firefighters and rescue squad in that county got to me. They had a Stokes basket, which is just a large wire basket that they put me in. They put me in a seat collar. They put me in that basket. They had a huge wheel called an Anderson wheel that clipped into the bottom of that basket. I mean, think of a massive, huge, like a lawnmower tire with big, heavy tread. And then they, like pallbearers, they 3 on each side, almost like a casket, but it's a Stokes basket. And they slowly wheeled me down the mountain and got to the ambulance. Erica was there waiting for us. Sweet lady had turned her ankle trying to, get to me, kind of running up the trail, and then realized, they're coming down. So she came down to meet us. They asked me where I want to go to the hospital. I told them Mission Hospital, which is the main hospital in Asheville, and it's our local hospital, and it's a bigger hospital, it has more resources. So we ride there, and this is the fire service community. And man, the lessons that I learned from this community versus other communities that I've been in. We work 3 shifts. There's an Alpha shift, Bravo shift, and Charlie shift. I'm on Bravo shift. That day was Alpha shift. And we're all deeply connected. We call it a brotherhood or sisterhood. When they wheeled me into the emergency room, I rode ladder 1, Bravo shift. They wheeled me in. The captain of ladder 1, Alpha, and the entire crew was sitting in the emergency room waiting for me. Dang. I don't know how they found out, but word just traveled. And they wheeled me in. The medics wheeled me and put me on the bed, and I looked up, and Captain Keonis is standing right there and puts his arm on my shoulder. And he said, we're with you, man. He goes, you're going to get through this. And I just remember bursting into tears. It just blew me away that they were there for that. So in the hospital, I do an overnight. They do all these. I'm so drugged at this point on morphine and all the other painkillers, and they do all these. They put me in they do an MRI. They do all the different scans, from x-rays to CAT scans, everything. And put me to bed. I wake up, Erica's there, and doctor comes in, and he said, the good news in all of this is you have no brain damage. Everything looks great. He said, but he goes, you have broken your C6 from your C7. And there's a mild fracture in your C1. And those are all in your neck. Those are all the vertebrae in your neck. And the C6, C7 are kind of lower right here. Where they broke, they're kind of connected in 2 places, those vertebrae. One side completely broke, and the other one's still connected. And what we're hoping is we can keep you in an Aspen collar here in the hospital, and those sides will reconnect, and then you're going to be looking at a 6 to 8 month recovery.
How long?
6 to 8 months. and we'll monitor you in that Aspen collar, kind of weekly at first, then we'll go every other week, just x-rays. So I said, okay. But they told me you're going to be in the hospital for a bit because we have to monitor you. Got through that day. There were so many firefighters off duty or on duty fire companies. And Asheville's a small city, but we have, many stations that were coming. There were so many people coming in. I don't even remember half of them coming in because I was so drugged up. But there were so many of them coming in to love on me and other friends in my community, not just firefighters. But the nurses made hours just for me. They said he can only get visitors from 2 to 4 because there's so many people coming. Like he's not getting rest. You can only come in here to see him. And the outpouring of love was amazing. My second night in the hospital, I woke up and Erica went home to be with the children and take care of the kids. My mother-in-law and my parents were around to help her with the kids. But I woke up that morning and I could feel someone squeezing my foot in the bed. And I woke up and there was a dark room, kind of this dark figure. And then my eyes kind of adjusted. And there was the chief of Asheville Fire Department. And he was squeezing my toes. And as you guys know about me, I have a very dark sense of humor. And that tends to be a thread with a lot of firefighters. And he looks at me and he goes, man, 2013 has been a shitty year, right? That's all he says. It starts laughing. And I said, yes, sir. It has been a really bad year. And at that time, I'd worked for the fire department for 4 years and I had some sick time built up. Not a lot, but some. And he said, Hayne, I want you to know that you don't need to worry about your sick time. You'll never miss a paycheck. And I said, okay. And I said, okay. And he goes, we just want you to recover and get better. And I said, well, how's that possible? I only have so much sick time. He said, your captain, who was a senior captain at the time, 25-year vet at that point, reached out to me and said, there's a group of guys that want to donate 24 hours to Hayne for sick time here in the station. Can we do that? And he said, well, actually, let's just open it up to the department and see who will do it. So they did. And he said, Hayne, 87 people donated you 24 hours of their personal sick time for you to recover.
Gosh.
And he said, and our department's 300. He said, and we only sent the email to Bravo shift. We didn't even send it to Alpha or Charlie.
Jeez.
He said, almost the entire shift donated you 24 hours of each person of their sick time. And if we need to dip into Alpha and Charlie, because I'm getting emails from people asking me if they can donate, he said, we'll definitely do that. And I just started to bawl, I just couldn't believe the outpouring of generosity and love. That was huge. A couple more days went by. I was told that I was probably going to be discharged. I had the Aspen collar on. They said, before we discharge you, we're going to take an x-ray just to make sure we're good. So this nurse comes in. He has my discharge papers, sets them on the countertop, leaves. Another group of nurses come in, put me in a wheelchair, take me to the x-ray room. They x-ray me, bring me back to the bed. Erica's sitting there with me. The same nurse that brought the discharge papers walks right back in the door, takes the discharge papers, and leaves. And I looked at Erica and I said, oh, shit. And I said, I don't think I'm going home. He took the papers away. And she said, oh, maybe a clerical. I said, no, I don't think I'm going home. Then PA came in and he said, hey, we have bad news. And I said, okay, what's up? And he said, not only is it not reconnecting, he said, but we have 3 millimeters of extra movement in your spine or in your vertebrae. And he goes, I know 3 millimeters sounds small, but in the spinal world, that's a mile. And he said, we're going to have to operate on you. Like we're going to have to fuse your C6 and C7 together. The surgeon's going to come in and talk to you pretty soon. He goes, you're going to be okay, but this is just our reality. And so I got injured. My rec was on a Sunday and I was told Wednesday I'm going to have surgery. Doc comes in. He's like, listen, I don't want you getting out of bed unless you got to pee because I want to keep your movement at a minimum. He said, Friday, we're going to operate on you. And he said, you don't need to worry. He said, Peyton Manning just had this exact surgery a year ago. And that was the year he won the Super Bowl with the Broncos. He said, so you're going to be just fine. He said, I've performed thousands of these. And he said, you're going to be my 3rd fusion that day. He said, I'm going to be all warmed up. We're good to go. And that helped me, And then hearing from other people, they were like, well, who's your surgeon? I told them a couple of guys in the medical world. And they're like, you got the best, man. He's the best. His name is long. His name is John Silver. I kept call him Long John Silver. So the day of the surgery came, and I was going to have surgery that afternoon. And about 20 minutes before my surgery started, the president of our union, so I'm a member of the International Association of Firefighters, and a president walked in, great guy, Scott, walked in, had an envelope in his hand, was checking on us, and then he turned to Erica and handed her this envelope and said, "This is from the union," and looked at me and said, "Get better." He walked out, and at this point, it was maybe T-minus 10 minutes till they wheeled me out for surgery. And Erica said, "Do you want to open the envelope and see what's in it?" And I was like, "Sure." So she opens the envelope and just starts to bawl, just bawling. And I was like, "What is it?" And she holds it up, and it's a check for $2,500, which covers the rest of my out-of-pocket for my medical bills. For the
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Unbelievable. So I'm in tears. She's in tears. And she looked at me and she goes, "We're financially going to be okay. Like, this isn't going to sink us, you know?" So I walked into surgery with that good news. Well, I didn't walk in any place. I got rolled into surgery. Rolled in, the surgery was done. I spent 2 or 3 more days, came home. And then, and this is when things get nuts, and then I'll start unpacking the kind of the bigger picture for us. But I'd been home for 48 hours. Erica and the children, my mother-in-law, went to the grocery store. I needed to get up and pee, but I was still under the influence, like the residual influence of anesthesia. So whenever I sat up or even tried to stand, my blood pressure would drop really quick. I get really lightheaded. So I was already dealing with some anger over the whole thing happening. Was at a place in my life where I felt like every single thing happened for a reason, which that's fine if other people are in those places. I was deep into that place. Got out of bed, went to go to the bathroom, and I collapsed. I blacked out. And I remember blacking out, and I remember going down. I remember falling backwards onto a hickory hard floor and smashing the back of my head on the hardwood floor. And then I remember vaguely hearing the door open and Erica coming in and yelling, "Oh no," and running to me. And she came to me trying to help me. And I was so angry. I was so pissed. And she was like, "Why are you angry?" And I was like, "Fuck God." That's exactly what I said. I said, "Fuck him." And she was just holding me and she's crying. And I looked up to the heavens, you know, as much as I could through a ceiling in a house. And I just said out loud, I said, "You have fucked me. I have done everything for you. I followed the rules forever. And I get diabetes, and I'll break my neck. I don't even know if I'm going to get to work again. Fuck you." Oh, dude, I was so pissed. And she got me up and helped me to bed. I got in bed, and then fear just washed over me. I was like, oh my God. I just told God to fuck off after what just happened. Everybody stay away because a lightning strike's coming. I think this is bad. I'm about to get terminal pancreatic cancer. He's going to jack me up now. And I got so scared. And all I could do was call my mom. I just needed something I needed mom. And I called my mom and I was crying and I was like, "I've done it now." And she's like, "What have you done?" And I said, I told God to fuck off. And she said, "It's okay, Hayne. He's just a pissed off kid. He can take it. You think you're the first person to tell God to fuck off? You think you're the first person to tell him he sucks? You're just a pissed off kid. It's okay. Let her rip. Go read the Psalms. Yeah. Half of them is David irate."
Yeah.
And I hung up with her and I just started praying. I was like, "I'm sorry." And I just had this almost audible voice say to me, "For the first time in your life, 34 years old, you finally were real with me. You weren't playing games. You weren't trying to put on a facade. You let me know how you really felt Good for you. And I love you. And I can take it. Just, you can say whatever you need to say.
Wow.
Thank you for actually praying for the first time, for being real for the first time.
And to this day, is that like a cornerstone of faith to where you're just like, you don't care what anybody else thinks, but Hayne knows that was God? I mean, obviously, I hold that a little loosely because I would assume you chalk it up to maybe 0.5% that it wasn't God, but where you stand, you're like, that was God.
Yeah. And those are the moments, Joey, like we talked about in the podcast before, when Erica's cancer stuff, and it's just easier for me some days to be like, I'm just going to be an atheist today. Or even when I struggle with stuff, I do look back. There's a few things in my life. I look back at that exact moment and I'm like, no, there was something mystical that happened. It was way beyond me that I couldn't have generated.
Yeah.
So that feels like a touch into the divine. Something supernatural. So for me, it's these touchstones in my life, and that's a big one that I can touch on and say, no, I do feel faithful today. There's been some big things, significant things that I feel like I've experienced. So yeah. And that whole experience, that after that, being angry and pissed, and all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, I now feel free. It was like freeing to explore my faith a little bit more. And I now feel free to start reading the no-no books, the Richard Rohr books. I'm going to start reading the Greg Boyd books because I was at the time more Calvinist in my thinking. I was a good Presbyterian. So I started ingesting this material and was like, holy smokes, there's this whole other world of thought that I had no idea. And these are men and women who deeply walk with God, and they look at the scriptures completely different. And damn it, it actually holds water. Like, it makes sense to me. But the biggest thing for me is that what they were saying was making sense of my experience. It was making sense of my overall human experience, but particularly my experience with my suffering. And I just wasn't getting that from what I had grown up with. So that was the beginning for me of asking some really hard questions. My thoughts began to change, and Erica had already been there because Erica had dealt with years before a really hard bout of dual sciatica in both of her. She's a runner, and she developed dual sciatica. Well, she went through these no-no books years before I did.
Yeah.
And she was so sweet and so patient with me. She would like throw little nuggets out, and I was kind of oblivious to them. But then all of a sudden, I was going through the no-no books, and everything started to change. I'm like, wait a minute. I remember her, and I realized, we had these huge suffering experiences, and now we're coming to these same places spiritually. And she was way more patient about my growth than I would have probably been with hers if it had been flipped, at that point. So that was the beginning. And that completely changed the trajectory of our life, not just our faith to where we are today. But we were living it wasn't a huge house, but I have a construction background. We had built a house in the small little mountain town we live in just outside of Asheville. I think it was like 2,300 square feet. So nothing huge, but it wasn't small either by any stretch. And we just kind of went on this thing about what really matters is our love, the love for each other. And we started shifting things from a view of being more proprietary, the things that we have, to we want to develop great experiences together. Relationships are eternal. These things are not. So we had crazy conversations. I mean, crazy. Like, how many heated square feet do we need? Do we actually need 2,300, heated square feet? Nope. So we started thinking about that. It's like, we could probably live just fine between, 1,400 and 1,500 square feet. So we started to casually look for a place to move to. We even, particularly me, I was even like, how many pairs of underwear do I need? And how many shirts do I need? And I'm not that I'm not that strict anymore, but I do have a certain amount of collared shirts that I have in my closet. And whenever I'm given a new collared shirt, I'll take that one and I'll find an old one, and I just send it to somebody, give it to somebody else, to try to keep things, to try to keep me honest, to be honest. So it totally changed our perspective. And then from there, we downsized considerably. beautiful little spot outside of town, but we went to 1,400 square feet. But because we did that, it financially opened up this world where we could start traveling more and doing stuff with our kids. And we bought a little camper that was a piece of crap, but we loved it, and we carried it up, drove it all around the mountains. And
well, real quick, it actually is fascinating because you're a close friend, and I know your current setup, and I know how you do your life, but had no idea that it wasn't always that way. And now to see actually how you got here. And another huge light bulb is you and this is just how I interpreted it, but when you have talked in the past about what has jolted your faith as far as this this crazy injury and then the things that you've witnessed as a paramedic, I always heard that as this is what's jolted your faith and shaken it in maybe like a less than, now you have less faith, where now I'm hearing it as it shook your faith, but at the same time, like solidified it in some ways. And I never knew that part.
And that's the mysticism of the whole experience. And yes, the things that I have experienced as a firefighter, even today, there's things that have happened in the last week that it makes me pause and say, where is goodness here? Does goodness exist? But I think that that's the beauty of the faith. Stoy and I had a really interesting conversation together maybe a month ago. We just kind of went off in a conversation about, the whole, do you believe on the 10 scale, where's your faith? And kind of unpacking that together. One of the things I told him is I said, that's the richness of my faith. I love the fact that I'm at a 6 because I'm wrestling with it. And I think that's the point. The journey is the point, is that I don't give a shit about being a 10. I don't really care. I don't care about the number. What I'm interested in is the journey, is the wrestling, because it's at that space that I experience God in these crazy mystical levels. And at the same time, I have days like a day last week where I am struggling with something I saw on the rig. And I'm like, man, does God even give a damn? Is God even real? It sure would be easier for me right now if we're just a rock floating in space and it's just all happenstance. And I think that that's the beauty of the whole faith experience, is that that's working out our salvation in a sense, in a way. So, but prior to the wreck, I experienced for 4 years some really shitty things that had happened to good people. But because they were removed enough from me in relationship, or removed enough from me that it wasn't happening to me, I was able to compartmentalize it. And I said, well, here's my faith life, my faith box. And I was not combining it with my experience box. But then when my experience of suffering happened and I had to deal with those two boxes, all of a sudden meshed, and I had a choice. I could either focus on that and work through it and be transformed by the whole scenario, or I could just get pissed, which would have been my go-to much younger, and transmit my anger onto everyone around me. And I think that that's where places of suffering bring us. There's a crossroads. We can either be transformed by our pain, or we can transmit our pain onto everybody. And we all know people, that's their story. So I'm just so thankful that I had a family, a support system that just encouraged me to be transformed. And when I didn't want to be transformed, they were patient with me. And dude, what the fire department taught me about community was unbelievable. And in my church at the time, good people, and there were people in my community who were neighbors, who were close, that were in our church community, that would come and check on me often. But compared to what the fire service, what the fire department, what that community did for me, I remember thinking, dude, if the church interacted this way with the community and with their members, that would be so alluring, so attractive. People want to be connected to the church just because they're so curious about how these people love each other so much and take care of each other so much.
Book of Acts.
Exactly. We have missed the ball.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just it was obviously that was the major turning point for me. And
that's another aha moment, is I've always recognized, man, Hayne is deeply connected to the fire department. Now I know why.
Yeah. The family. It's unreal. And I've always wanted to give back. I've given lots of sick time to guys. Part of that connection too, one of my firefighters right now is going through a horrible breakup. It's a 5-year-long relationship and he's just devastated. I just love being there for him and sitting there and listening and talking through that. I truly believe and he comes from an Eastern mysticism. He's very connected to Eastern religion. And I start talking about stuff and I'm coming from it from a Christian perspective. And he's like, dude, is that coming from Vishnu, Buddha? Like, where is that? I'm like, no, it's Jesus. It's like, it sounds just like the Buddha. So I'm like, right.
Yeah.
Because truth's truth.
Right.
Right. And and that's the other thing for me is all of a sudden truth became way bigger than just my small Christian perspective. It's like, golly, all these great spiritual teachers are all pointing to the same thing, just from different places.
When you went through this and you were in a more reformed theological bent and you were telling God to F off, were you thinking this was God's ordained will, like God did this? Because that's the John Pipers of this world would tell the parents of a child who was raped that this is God's will. Like, is that where you're at? Like, this is God's doing?
Oh, yeah.
How do you reflect on it now when it comes to God? Do you see it as a blessing? Do you see it as something God allowed? Probably doesn't matter what you think. I mean, honestly.
Yeah. So in those places where I'm deep in faith and I reflect on it, I'm in a very faithful spot, allowed. So I can't, and I'm not supposed to dissect the math as to why even that was allowed. I found so much great comfort when I was hurt in 2013. Greg Boyd, who's a brilliant Bible teacher out of St. Paul, Minnesota, was doing a series on the book of Job. And boy, like my mind was just blown. And he was coming from the perspective of this book of the Bible. Like there's so many things about it, the literary piece of it that just points to this. Job wasn't a real dude. This is a story, but it's supposed to teach a truth. It's Chesterton's old thing about, the point of fairy tales is not to teach you that dragons are real. It's to teach you that dragons can be beaten metaphorically. And I love that about the book of Job. One of the big things from takeaway from Boyd's teaching was, it's very obvious in the beginning of that book. God didn't author this. He just allowed it. Satan came in the story, in the myth, and said, hey, I want to sift Job. I want to sift him. And God was like, there he is. And some people may say, well, since he allowed that to happen, in some ways he did author it. But I don't think that's the point of the story. The point of the story is that it just happened. And then I think the folly, and how many funerals have you sat in, Joe, or I've sat in, or whatever, where someone says, they quote Job. It sounds honorable. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But when we know the first part of that text in Job, which is this was allowed, and then you hear Job saying that a couple chapters later, you realize Job has no understanding of suffering at all. God didn't give or take away from you at all. We know that God just allowed it to happen. God didn't author that. He didn't give or take away. Satan did. But it sounds real honorable to say the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away.
Yeah.
I think that verse, it sounds good in a funeral, but that verse is more showing Job's folly of thought. He didn't understand what was going on. So,
well, what's super interesting now about Boyd, so I don't know what his journey has been and how he's gotten here and how long he's been here, but he's now an open theist. And so he would potentially now say, well, Hayne, God just wasn't able to stop it because God is limited in his power.
And I'm at that place. For love to exist, and this is something that Stoics hit on, which I loved. For love to exist, for us to know what love is, there has to be an opposite to it. We don't understand love if there's not suffering. Love has no definition if there's no loss. If there's no such thing as loss or suffering, then there's no such thing as love. We know that love is what it is because we know the opposite of it. The opposite is what gives it definition, if that makes sense. So for there to be love, there has to be the possibility of loss that has to exist. For example, the love that I have between Erica that we experience, it's so rich because we've said yes to each other all the time, knowing that there's a possibility that she could leave me, knowing there's a possibility I could leave her, that I could cheat on her, she could cheat on me, that she could fall out of love with me. Because that possibility exists and is there, the possibility of loss, the fact that we say yes to one another over and over and over through our words or our actions, it makes it all the more special because we know that we could lose one another. The loss piece is what gives love its power. So I believe that God is love, and for love to exist, there has to be the possibility of loss and suffering. And I believe, and this is just all experiential, and Boyd can point to things theological, and this is why I just don't get into the weeds. It's why I often call myself a Christian agnostic, which the classical definition of that is I believe in God, the divinity of Jesus, the virgin birth, and that's about it. I'm not going to get into the weeds on everything else and take a hard stance, but there's so many things we can point to in history. Let's go to the Holocaust. That'd be a good one. It would have been nice for God to I think God would probably maybe intervened at some level, but I think that God stands back and he, she, they let things happen because that is suffering. Quoting Richard Rohr, we are transformed by either great love or great suffering. And it's usually great suffering. Buddha teaches the same stuff. And for us to come to places to be truly transformed, evolved, high conscious level people of love, of holistic acceptance of everything, we have to suffer really, really hard. And unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. And we see that play out in the Old Testament over and over and over again, where the Hebrew people and the Jews are just getting shit on. And they make some pretty bad choices too. And you see this growth pattern of they take 2 steps forward and then something really stupid happens and a step back, suffering, and they grow from it. Then a step back. That's the human experience. If we allow that to be our experience, if we're awake to that experience. So that's why I'm completely okay being in a place to say it's just allowed. And I'm not a deist. I do believe in intervention, but the God's just like, hey, this is how it's set up, and I'm just going to let that ball spin, and you guys are going to do what's going to happen is going to happen. But I do believe it's all being redeemed in the end.
Those no-no books will change your life, huh?
Fuck you up, dude. They will send you into a tailspin.
Pete Enns was my first no-no author.
Oh, what a great one. One of the best.
Yeah.
Pete Enns. One of the best.
Once I read his The Bible Tells Me So, I was like, there's no arguing what this guy is saying about the Bible. There's just not. What he's saying is what the Bible is.
Yep.
When it comes to how we're supposed to read it.
That's right.
I mean, or not, that's not how we're supposed to read it, what we can read out of it. There's no arguing this.
Yep, exactly.
Mean, he sets it up as, here's my take, and here's why, and you read it, and you're like, oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like, that's clear as day.
Right.
Like, why was I ever taught this perspective? And I love, I think one of the big pieces here, maybe to close on, is when we expose ourselves to different ways of thinking and we come with an open mind, it'll just change us. I say the same thing about whatever position you have on, or your views on racism, your views on homosexuality. We go down the road. If you develop a relationship of solidarity with someone who's not like you, different race, different sexual orientation, and you get to know them as a person and you consider who they are and they become human to you, develop a relationship with them, all of a sudden, these hard stances you used to take, those things don't hold water anymore. Yeah. They just don't. They change you. They make you a more loving person.
Yeah.
So,
hey,
go read the no-no books, people.
Yeah. Not only has Robbie not gotten into no-no books, but he doesn't veer outside of Charles Dobson. Like that's his guy.
That's Swindoll maybe every now and then.
You just finished up John Piper for the first time.
Oh god. Oh man.
Holy moly.